All right, our first performance chart we're going to look at is the takeoff distance chart. To use the chart, we're going to go first to our outside air temperature. For this example, it's 9 degrees. So I'm going to draw a line starting from 9 degrees. That line from 9 degrees is going to meet our pressure altitude, which today is 384 feet. From that pressure altitude, I draw a line straight across to meet my weight. For this example, let's say our aircraft is loaded at 3,600 pounds. I'm going to draw a line from the reference line down to the weight of 3,600 pounds. Now I go to my next reference line, straight across. Today's headwind component is 4 knots. I'm going to follow my headwind line down to 4 knots to go straight across to my final reference line. The final reference line determines how much of an obstacle we have to clear. Let's say we have a 50-foot obstacle. I'm just going to follow the line and the reference line up to our finishing point right here. What this means is our takeoff distance to clear a 50-foot obstacle is going to be roughly 1,700 feet. Our 1,000 line is here, our 2,000 line is here, so 1,500 would be about here, giving us about a 1,700 takeoff distance. The next performance chart is our accelerate stop distance. What accelerate stop is it's we get to the point of rotation, 71 knots, and we have an engine failure at that point of rotation, and we're going to stop the airplane on the runway. We have accelerate stop, and we have accelerate go. As we said, accelerate stop is keeping the airplane on the runway. Accelerate go is accelerating to the point of rotation, having an engine failure, and then continuing to climb over a 50-foot obstacle. Note, any light twins below 6,000 pounds or with a stall speed below 61 are not guaranteed to climb. Therefore, our accelerate stop is always going to be the choice that we use in our area. To determine our accelerate stop distance, we're going to go to our chart and we're going to find our outside air temperature of 9 degrees. I'll go up to my pressure altitude of 384, across to our reference line for weight, down to my 3,600 reference line, and then across. Now today we have a 4-knot headwind, so I'll go down on my headwind reference line to 4 and straight across. With the current conditions, we have an accelerate stop distance of about 2,200 feet. Now to be safe, you need to add a 10% buffer to this distance. Why? Because we're not perfect and our airplane's not perfect, and these charts are made for a brand new airplane with perfect piloting. Therefore, the 10% buffer gives us a good buffer for any issues we might see during the run. Our next chart is our accelerate go distance chart. Remember, accelerate go is where we get to the point of rotation, 71 knots, experience an engine failure, and climb over a 50-foot obstacle at 80 knots. Any light twin below 6,000 pounds or with a stall speed of less than 61 knots is not guaranteed to climb. So while Beechcraft does give us this chart, we need to remember this usually is not the correct option between accelerate stop and accelerate go. You'd rather be sorry with an engine failure on the ground than try to continue flight and risk going into an obstacle while trying to climb single engine. To use this chart, we're going to go to our outside air temperature of 9 degrees, follow it up to our pressure altitude, across to our reference line, and then we're going to follow the trend of the line up to our weight. Our weight is 3,600 pounds. So I'm going to meet that 3,600 pound line right here, and I'm going to go across now to my reference line for the wind. We still have 4 knots of headwind. And then we go across to find our total distance. For today's conditions, our accelerate go distance is going to be about 5,800 feet. Remember, we're still going to want to add that 10% buffer for pilot reaction time and pilot air, but we need to remember what this note right here says, note 3. Weights in shade area may not provide positive one-engine and operative climb. So as we discussed, while yes, at 5,800 feet we should be able to climb over a 50-foot obstacle, We're not guaranteed that single engine. Our next chart is our climb performance with 2 engines operative. I'm going to go to my temperature of 9 degrees and follow that up to our pressure altitude of 385 feet. I'm then going to go across to my reference line. I'm going to follow that reference line to my weight of 3,600. I then go across, and I see with 2 engines operative, we have about 1,450 feet per minute climb, dual engine. Our next chart is our climb performance with only 1 engine operative. Same procedure. I go to my outside air temperature of 9 degrees, follow that up to my pressure altitude. I'm going to go across to my reference line, follow it up to my weight, and across. We see that our rate of climb with 1 engine and operative is going to be about 220 feet per minute. Again, we are not guaranteed to climb single engine. So while we do have a 220 feet per minute climb per the book, in real life, we may not have that. We need to understand now, when we lose an engine, we don't lose half our performance. We lose half our thrust, but we don't lose half our performance. With 1 engine and operative, our climb performance is 220 feet per minute. With both engines operative, it's 1450. So if we take 220 and divide that by 1450, we lose about 85% of our performance when we have an engine failure. So we may lose half our thrust, but we really lose about 85% of our performance with that engine failure. Our next chart discusses our service ceiling with 1 engine and operative. What the definition of service ceiling is it's the altitude where if the airplane has an engine failure, it'll be able to climb 50 feet per minute, single engine. Our dual engine service ceiling is where the airplane can climb 100 feet per minute, but our single engine is only 50 feet per minute. How we find this is by working this chart backwards. I would go to the 9 degrees Celsius line and follow it up to my weight of 3,600 pounds. I'm then going to draw a line straight across, and we see our service ceiling for today's condition is roughly 7,500 feet. That means at 7,500 feet, we should be able to climb about 50 feet per minute with 1 engine and operative. Our next chart is going to be used to find our absolute ceiling. The definition of absolute ceiling is where we have 0 feet per minute climb, single engine. Absolute ceiling can also be called drift out altitude. If we have an engine failure above our absolute ceiling, we will drift down to that altitude that we're going to find here, and we'll be able to maintain the altitude in our drift out altitude. Now, when we're route planning, we need to think about drift out altitude. Let's say we're out in Montana, and we're flying from Helena, Montana to Bozeman, Montana. There's terrain at about 11,000 feet. While we may be able to fly at 12, 13, 14,000 feet, if we have an engine failure, we don't want our drift out altitude to be below the terrain, because if we have an engine failure, we're going to drift down into the terrain. So when picking a route, you could always choose an MEA or an altitude that is higher than our drift out altitude. So if we have an engine failure, we can drift down and still be above the terrain. To find our absolute ceiling, we're going to go to 0 feet per minute on the right side of the chart. I'm going to draw that line across to my reference line of my weight. I'm going to follow that down to our other reference line. And I go straight across until I hit the line. When I hit the line at my standard temperature, that's our drift out altitude. Now this says pressure altitude up here, but we're going to change that to density altitude, and I'm going to use my standard temperature here. So if I find 15 degrees Celsius and follow it up to where my line meets, my drift out altitude is going to be right there. So about 9,000 feet is my drift out altitude for this airplane. Our next chart is to calculate our landing distance. Landing distance is calculated with flaps down. I'm going to find my temperature of 9 degrees, Follow that line straight up to my pressure altitude of 384. I'm going to go straight across to my headwind component of 4. Follow that down to 4. And then we're just going to go straight across as best I can here. And we're going to see our landing distance with no obstacle is roughly 700 to 800 feet. If I had a 50-foot obstacle, I'm going to follow that reference line up. And we're going to see a 50-foot obstacle is roughly 15 to 1600 feet if we have a 50-foot obstacle. Without a 50-foot obstacle, it's about 750 feet landing distance.